Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with quite a few figures. We don't have just one to take a look at, we actually have 6 figures overall that we are going to review, as we've got a brand new, I guess, company that is producing dinosaur figures, but since they're not really the highest quality in the world, I figured we'd just take a look at them all in one shot and see what this company is all about. The company is called King Me World, and we can see if we bring one of them in. Down here it states King Me World and then Movable Joints Dinosaur. So they are articulated dinosaur figures, not super articulated, but articulated nonetheless. The packaging is actually kind of fun. You can see again the front has basically like a concrete sort of a look, and then there's like cracks and stuff all over, and then down here it kind of makes it look like the T-Rex is basically just walking through the streets and he's like destroying the road as he walks down and everything. So it looks really cool. I will give them, an A for effort when it comes to the packaging. The dinosaurs themselves look fun, not incredible, but kind of fun. So definitely fun enough that I grabbed the entire line that I have seen so far out. There are cheaper looking versions of these that don't sport articulation and stuff, but I chose to get these guys. And recently I had seen them on AliExpress, and AliExpress had a pretty good deal where you could buy the entire group of all 6, and I forget how much it was, like maybe like $25-$30 or something like that, and that's like including shipping for all of them. So I figured, what the heck, I might as well just grab them all in one shot. And you can see again, when you take a look at the back, it states that there is an action feature, kind of shows off the action feature, drastically exaggerates the size of the figures though, which you can see right there. But obviously when it comes to what we have in the line, there is a Tyrannosaurus Rex, there is a pretty cool looking Dilophosaurus. It's very thin and a little bit different from like the Jurassic Park type of a look, but at the same time sports the frills, so very Jurassic Park-ish, even though it kind of looks a little different. But you've also got a Pteranodon that, because of the way it's packaged, has a horribly warped beak, something that I'll have to try to fix at some point. And now that we're able to move those out of the way, you can see back there we've also got a Triceratops, a Stegosaurus, and a Velociraptor. I guess it's Velociraptor Blue. Who knows? Regardless, I'm going to pop each and every one of these out of the package, and we're going to jump straight to a closer look right now. Now, obviously, we are not going to go nearly as in-depth as I do with many other reviews because we've got so many to get through, but I do want to give you guys a feel for these figures so that you can decide if it's something maybe you want to pursue or not. But here is the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and you can see again when you start here in the head sculpt, it looks okay, like the detail isn't half bad. It has a little bit of a Jurassic Park-ish look, and that's not surprising considering most, toy companies kind of create their dinosaurs to look Jurassic Park-ish. You've got some decent detail here in the face that, doesn't look too muted or washed out or anything, but as you move down into the body, you can see that that does begin to occur. You do have much more kind of like washed out detail on the main body, the main piece for the body, but as you lead into the legs, the detail picks back up and again looks fairly impressive. Same deal with the arms and everything. Again, you do have some decent and fairly vibrant detail as you move through many of the other areas of the figure. You can also see there is a black eye, which does have a nice gloss coat to it, so that looks pretty good as well. You've got a little bit of like a pinkish tone or a reddish tone there around the eye. The mouth currently is in an open position. We can see the tongue sticking up in there. You can also see the paintwork of the inside of the mouth is incredibly sloppy. Looks okay on the inside of the mouth on the upper side, but when you look over here, like you've got paintwork from the teeth that's just slopped all over the tongue. This area here, if you let the light hit it, you can kind of see like part of the tongue isn't even really painted in there. And the teeth in general are just an absolute sloppy mess when it comes to the paintwork of the mouth. Like it just looks really quite rough. There's also a little bit of like a striping there in the palate. And yeah, we do have that over here. I didn't notice it actually over here at first. But again, you have like a dark brown that kind of stripes through the palette, and then you can see up here, you start to pick that dark brown up in the center of the head, and that falls along the back and does lead out into the tail. Not the entire way, but it does end right about there, and then it kind of like patterns down into the side of the figure. Outside of that, we really don't have any other paintwork. Like the underside sports the same tone that we have for the primary body color. The nails are unpainted and everything, so a little bit of a bummer as far as that goes, but overall I think the detailing aspect looks okay for the figure, but very muted in the body, unfortunately. And the paintwork is okay, but not really that great because there's not much to it, but it looks alright for what it is, for just a cheap, small, articulated dinosaur toy. But when you turn it around, you can see that we are dealing with dreaded screw holes, and one is incredibly ugly right there in the jaw. As you move back, you've got another one back here for the tail. You know, many other companies have a whole lot more when it comes to screw holes than we see for this one, but it definitely is still a bit of an eyesore for this side of the figure. But it does also have all sorts of articulation, but because of that, you can see some of the seams are just hideous, like absolutely awful looking seams on the figure, at least as far as the head goes. But you do have an articulated jaw. That's part of the action feature, but you can see when it's closed, it kind of looks like he's just really cold, like it doesn't close perfectly. You do have articulated arms, forward and back. You also have articulated legs, which are very stiff. Wow, are they stiff, forward and back. You definitely have to work those in. And then you've got a tail back here that does articulate up and down, but that's because when you articulate the tail up and down, you can see you've got a jaw snapping action feature. So you do have an action feature with the figure as well. We've also got the Velociraptor, and this Velociraptor is super goofy looking. First of all, it is painted up like Velociraptor blue, but not really well. Like, the paintwork is just absolutely everywhere and as generic and ugly as it gets when it comes to a Velociraptor blue paint job. The eye also looks like it maybe is slightly misplaced, but it's hard to really tell. We have an orange eye, black pupil. If the eye isn't misplaced, it is placed as far as the sculpt goes in a really, really bad, very ugly and awful looking spot. But as you move up, you can see the teeth are painted with a yellowish tone, and of course the inside of the mouth is pretty sloppy when it comes to that paintwork. It's pretty much everywhere. The tongue, unfortunately, doesn't have any paintwork. It is sculpted out in there, but there's no paintwork for the tongue, or in general for the inside of the mouth past the teeth. The teeth are like the only area where we really have paintwork for it. The eye looks a lot better over here compared to the first side that we had seen, but it still looks really quite goofy looking overall. The detail of the raptor, just like with the T-Rex, is pretty muted in the body. You can see the body also has a gloss coat to it, similar to the way the T-Rex had it, where, you know, on top of the detailing already being muted, it shines the detail away even more because of that sort of satin shine that the figure has. But again, you really only have a grayish tone for the color of the figure. No paintwork, of course, for the nails. You do have articulated arms, but I think that has to do with the action feature. Same deal with the jaw. Rather than the jaw being open like we saw in the T-Rex, the jaw is closed on the Velociraptor. You also have articulation in the legs. Yes, it's just very, very stiff, just like it was with the T-Rex. And there we go, we can move both legs. And then you have articulation in the tail, again, up and down, but that's because, yet again, we have an action feature. Now, as you can see, it opens the mouth, so it looks like it's, you know, again, snapping its jaws, and it also moves the arms. So, kind of fun, I guess, as far as that goes, but probably one of the ugliest Velociraptor figures I think I've ever seen. We've also got the Triceratops, and as you can see, again, they're definitely not the best figures in the world. I will say, I think the detail in the body, although still muted, somehow looks a little nicer on the Triceratops than it did on the others. But you can see the Triceratops is in almost kind of like a lunging pose or a charging pose. Looks like it's sort of running along. The head sculpt looks, again, pretty decent when it comes to the detail. Definitely severely shrink-wrapped, but kind of decent. You've got the tongue painted on the inside of the mouth with a reddish tone, a little sloppy as far as that goes, of course. You've got kind of like a red-orange for the eyes, and they are horribly sloppy, like they didn't even attempt to paint those within the area that it should have been painted. You've also got the pupils painted with a black, and then as you move up into the frill, you basically have a maroonish sort of a tone that kind of stripes in, moving around the frill. All of it has a strong satin shine as well. You primarily have a green for the body color, but the green of the actual body is a little bit of a different tone compared to the rest of the areas. Like, this has more of like a greenish gray for the head and the legs and even the tail, and then the body itself has more of like a military green. So I don't know if it was meant to be that way or if that's just a matter of like the material that they've used kind of showing different colors in the way it sits on the material. But it looks interesting, that's for sure. I wish the horns were painted. Sadly, they are not. But as you move back into the body, you do have more of that kind of maroonish tone moving along the spinal column and then striping down on each side. And that's really about it. No painted nails or anything. But again, sculpt-wise, it's okay for being kind of like a run-of-the-mill sort of generic Triceratops. When you turn it around, of course, it's got screw holes. These figures seem to all have screw holes on the opposing side. And unfortunately, the eye is, again, horribly painted over here, like just so sloppy, so much color just kind of laying everywhere in that area. You do have an action feature again, because if you pull the tail down, it articulates the head and gives us kind of like an attack action feature for the horns. So you do have articulation very clearly in both the head and the tail, which you can see. You've got articulation in the legs, which is crazy stiff. So forward and back, and of course, well, this one's really loose, but forward and back, of course, for, again, both the front and rear legs. These ones on this side, though, are definitely very stiff, and then, again, the articulation of the head and tail. But it's kind of a fun Triceratops. Has a very old-school look to it, which makes him, I think, a little more enjoyable. You've also got the Pteranodon, which has a crazy color scheme and probably the most paint out of any of these figures in the set. So basically, you can see the head sculpt of the Pteranodon has a black, then you've got some orange that kind of runs around the eye and then out into the beak. You've also got a white spot for the eye and then a dark green as you lead up into the crest of the pterosaur. You do have an articulated jaw for the figure. There's nothing really going on, though, on the inside of the mouth at all, like no paintwork, no detailing really, no tongue or anything in there. But as you move back through the head, you can see it looks okay. If it wasn't warped, you can see the jaw is severely warped because of the way it was sitting in the packaging. Then as you move back into the body of our pterosaur, you start to pick up some okay detail. Again, I think it's definitely got that washed out look, but at the same time, it looks kind of okay, but we still have that strong satin shine to the body. There's also some separation where the body connects to the wings, kind of common for this type of thing, especially considering the action feature is a push button, which has a flapping feature, very Mattel like as far as that goes. Like, that's exactly the way most of the Mattel Pteranodons work. But you've got a bluish tone for the body of the pterosaur, and then as you move out into the wings, we have more of that orange, and then it's kind of outlined with a white, and it just sort of stripes through, and there's also some spots and stuff. Kind of ugly paintwork, not really what I would say is natural for the figure. Like, it looks as generic as it gets when it comes to coloration on the wings of a pterosaur, but the detailing of the wings actually look really nice. You can see when you get nice and close and you move through the course of the wings, maybe even nicer actually on the underside. There you go. So you can really get a good look at what the actual detail looks like, and clearly the sculpt is very nicely done as far as the detailing aspect goes. Like, it's really highly detailed, and even on the underside you can kind of make out some decent detail. We also, of course, have screw holes down there, but no coloration really on the underside for our pterosaur, no painted nails or anything on the figure. You do also have articulation in the legs, which is kind of fun because then you can kind of get it into like a standing position, which is pretty neat, and they basically swivel almost all the way around. If the wing wasn't there, they could probably go all the way around, but it's, again, not the greatest pterosaur in the world, but probably one of the more fun figures in this group. You've also got the Stegosaurus. Now, the Stegosaurus definitely has the deer in the headlights look going on currently, as the eyes are gigantic when it comes to the paintwork. You have our Stegosaurus with its mouth sculpted in an open position, no coloration or really anything going on the inside of the mouth. You can see leading back, the plates are painted with a brown, and the detail of the plates looks alright. My camera's going to have a fit because it's green, but you can also see that the green coloration of the body is a different tone of green compared to what you see on the tail, legs, and head, so similar to the way the Triceratops looked. You've also got a mixture of yellows and browns down here on the underside of the Stegosaurus. So again, a little bit more paintwork than we've seen on some of the other figures in this set. You can see the plates continue to have that brown the entire way out, all the way out into the tail. Unfortunately, there is an area here where the plates are kind of like disconnecting. It almost looks like with Mattel, like that's where the fax app would be hiding, but I think that piece is just kind of popping out because of the poor construction of the figures. You do have an articulated neck, but it basically swivels, and that's really about it. Also, again, the same deal with the articulation for the legs. Very stiff, but you can move the legs forward and back. And I feel like the paint scheme, man, my camera hates these greens, but I feel like the paint scheme is kind of reminiscent to like a Lost World style Stegosaurus. They've just added a little bit more color than they probably should have, but kind of has that look. And then as you lead out, you also have articulation here in the tail of the Stegosaurus because you've got, again, a striking action feature. I'm not even sure how the heck we operate it, so I think maybe it's with this. Let's try that. Yep, so you push the plate down and it causes the tail strike, which we can see right there. And then if you turn it around, of course, we are dealing with some screw holes for our figure. Even more on this one than I think the others, because I can see 3 screw holes on this Stegosaurus. But again, not the greatest Stegosaurus, but it's kind of fun. And then the final one of the group, another green figure, we have the Dilophosaurus. And this one I think is probably my favorite just because it's such a strange looking figure. It almost looks like a mixture between a Compsognathus and a Dilophosaurus. So it's like a Dilopsognathus or something, I don't know. But you can see, again, the head sculpt looks fairly decent. You've got some reds here, kind of by the nostrils, and then in the eye area, you've got the crest sculpted out pretty decently. The eyes are painted with a yellow and a black pupil, very, very sloppy. The teeth are painted really sloppily as well, painted with a yellow, but weirdly enough, we only have teeth on the upper jaw. There's no teeth on the lower jaw at all, so now I'm maybe questioning my preference as far as this one being the favorite. You can see the tongue in there though, but again, the screw hole here on the face on this side is absolutely horrendous. The frill is sculpted a little bit differently than you see when it comes to your standard Dilophosaurus, like the shape of it looks a little different. You've got a good bit of color in this area as you have a black or a dark gray outlining the outer edge, then you've got a yellow and red on the inside, as well as more of that dark gray moving closer to the neck of the Dilophosaurus. But it looks okay as far as the detail goes, but there's just so much paint work going on in there, it's hard to really pick up on the detail. You've got some nice looking detail on the back of the frill as well though, and as you move down you basically just have a greenish tone for the body. But again, just like the last few green dinosaurs, the green of the primary body is a little bit of a different shade of green compared to what you see on the arms, legs, and tail. But the detail, again, definitely washed out, but looks, honestly, I would say the best on this one out of any of the figures that have been in this line. Overall, I feel like the detail just looks nicer in the body. You do, again, have articulation in both the arms and the legs, forward and back. You've got all sorts of really nice muscle definition and everything displayed. Foot sculpt looks okay. You can see a little extra material on them because, again, they are pretty cheap looking figures. And then you lead out, you've got like some osteoderms following out through the course of the tail with a nice little curve out there at the end of the tail. The action feature is exactly what you would expect it to be. The mouth opens and the frill extends. Not really perfectly, but it does do it. And then again, as we lead over here, we can see there is another screw hole on the opposing side, sadly, for the figure. But when it comes to a goofy Dilophosaurus figure, I don't know why, but I kind of like this one. Now, as far as balance goes, as you can see, the Velociraptor does not really stand too well. I mean, some of them I'm not going to have to worry about that, like the Pterosaurus not really going to stand. You've got the Triceratops and the Stegosaurus, which are quadrupedal, so they should hypothetically stand at least fairly decent. Yeah, they can stand okay. The T-Rex, I don't know, not so much. You can get him in a tripod position, so he doesn't really stand too well either. And then the Dilophosaurus, come on, see if you can stand. Nope. So pretty much none of them stand unless they've got 4 legs or wings. And obviously the winged version isn't standing, it's just laying down. But as far as a size goes, I don't think we really need to measure all of them. I think we should just measure maybe just the T-Rex here. For a length, you're looking at about 7 3/4 inches or around 19.5, closing actually more like 20 centimeters, I would say. And then for a height, if it's standing the way it should, just a hair under 4 inches or 10 centimeters. But for a size comparison, I think that's probably going to help us the most when it comes to deciphering the sizes of these guys. So even though there are so many figures, kind of just like a jumbled mess of figures in there in between all of these others. We do have Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Dilophosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day Human Being next to these dino figures here, and you can see they're pretty small. I would say, honestly, we're like right there in the attack pack size range, danger pack size range, basically, whatever you'd like to call it. So I think what we're going to do is just take these other figures out of here, and then I'll just compare two different quadrupeds when it comes to that size range. So here we have the Attack Pack Dilophosaurus and very clearly the Triceratops from this brand, and you can see they're kind of similar in size. Same thing if we bring the Triceratops out and drop our Stegosaurus in, who's about to fall on his face because the arm just articulated. I mean leg, not arm. But you can see again they are very, very similar in size. And then if we go ahead and grab two bipedal figures, we actually got the T-Rex to stand, but you can see when it comes to like a Mattel Velociraptor and the T-Rex from this line, obviously they're very similar in size. The Raptor's a little bit taller, but pretty similar in size overall. And it would be a pretty tough task to bring in the Dilophosaurus and actually get it standing, but if we bring in a Mattel Dilophosaurus, you can see again that these two as well are very similar in size. I wondered at one point if maybe these were bootlegs because they both have pretty much the same, or I mean the Dilophosaurus was a bootleg because it pretty much has the same style and action feature as the Mattel Dilophosaurus, but definitely not. They are very different as far as the sculpt and everything goes, but clearly they saw their inspiration for the action feature from the Mattel Dilophosaurus. And then for the pterosaur, if we bring in the Geosternbergia from Mattel, which is basically again the standard size range for like the Pteranodons and stuff, you can see that the Pteranodon from this line is pretty much right there in the same size range as your standard Mattel Pteranodon. So these King Me World dinosaur figures are kind of fun, but very cheap. Definitely not high quality. They're not, anything that I should say anyone should rave over. They're very generic, very cheap feeling, and even the sculpts, although some of the detail is pretty nice, the sculpts are also quite cheap. Again, the material used as far as the primary bodies of all of them kind of drowns out the detail and makes the figures look less impressive overall. The areas like the legs and arms and tails and heads and everything usually have a bit more as far as the detail goes. It looks a little bit nicer, but I don't think that's enough to save these figures. They do also have screw holes, which help to make them look even uglier. The paint applications aren't really anything too impressive for the most part. They as well are as generic as the figures themselves are, but you add that in with the fact that the paintwork is actually pretty sloppy overall, and the paint in general isn't very good. The articulation seems to work okay, for the most part. Some areas are fairly smooth, some areas are a little stiff, but wearing them in and using them over time would definitely help to eliminate the stiffness of the joints. But the action features are kind of okay. Some of them work all right, but some of them don't really work that well. It just depends on the figure, I guess, but they seem like the action features are all right. The figures do also have, again, ugly screw holes and ugly seams throughout, which definitely are another negative. So again, you've got a whole lot as far as the mixed bag goes. They're kind of fun just because they are sort of Mattel-style dinosaur figures of like a very cheap quality, but they're also not really that well done overall, and this King Me World company should definitely try improving these figures overall and, moving forward and creating them with a higher quality. And even if that includes, adjusting the price, making the price a little bit more, if you improve the quality, you're going to bring in more customers because people are going to want to acquire them then, rather than just kind of, making these for super cheap and then sending them out onto the market. So it's up to you guys. If you are interested, I will include a link in the description to where you can purchase these on AliExpress, where I purchased mine. So make sure you check that link, grab them if you want them, and of course, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.